Welcome to Oscarsborg Fortress. My name is Morten Svinndal. I'm a retired captain from Norwegian Navy and now a guide and history teller at Oscarsborg Fortress, or FhM Oscarsborg Fortress, which is a new title of our museum. Behind camera we have Gry Larsson, and we are now going to give you a new film on what happened to the Blücher. If you want to stay ahead of this and get some notifications when we get new films, then it's just to subscribe on the YouTube channel and you will get the notifications. So what we're going to tell you about now is what happened after the battle of the Drøbak Narrows. What happened after Blücher was hit and the rest of Combat Group 5 was driven back and forced to retreat. We are just have a short intro here in the office, show you on the map, and then we will go out to where it really happened. So what we have here is the inner part of the Oslo fjord. This is just the last third of the Oslo fjord that we see here, and we can see that it's really narrow. And we can also see that it has two different lanes. There's one going into the city of Drammen, which was once protected by Svelvik fortifications here, which was part of Oscarsborg Fortress. And the other lane that the Germans had to use to get into Oslo on the 9th of April was this lane. And we can see that if you pass Oscarsborg Fortress here, you will have just about 10 miles, then you're into Oslo city. And the Blücher was supposed to berth just 300 meters from where the government was assembled at that night. The Oscarsborg Fortress is mainly on the islands here, but also with two batteries involved on the mainland in here. That was a 6-inch battery and a 57mm battery over there. And the Blücher coming in here, and you can see it's quite narrow. So you have some navigational hazards here as well. And when you get a battery firing at you in addition, it's quite difficult to get through here with a major ship. So the Blücher was fired upon approximately here. And that was very short range, say a little bit more than 1,000 meters for a 11-inch gun is pretty short. And then they started to fire from Husvik as well. But when the Blücher passed here, it was not possible to turn the guns further to the right from Husvik. So it went further on here and then came outside the torpedo battery 5 minutes after the fire opening, and then was hit by 2 torpedoes here. And then the vessel listed. It was burning in several places, and the machinery was out due to the torpedo hits. So they had to just drift up here northwards. And of course the captain had to anchor in order to get control of the ship. And he did so just south of the Oscarsborg Islands up here. And when he anchored here, the ship just turned around with the current that went in the opposite direction of the ship originally. And we will later on go up to Hallangen and see how it looks like in here, just outside where the ship anchored. And we'll also go to Hallangen farm, where they actually received 1,000 of these soldiers and crew members that came from Blücher and managed to survive. Because we know that out of a little bit more than 2,000 on board the Blücher, probably a little bit more than 400 died during the shelling and also drowned when they tried to get ashore from the sinking ship. So now we are on the Hallangen Peninsula, which is in the inner part of the Oslo fjord. So this is where anyone will have to pass in order to get into Oslo harbor. And this is also where Combat Group 5 had to pass in 1940 to reach the capital. And we can see outside here are 3 minor islands. You have the southern Oscarsborg, the middle Oscarsborg, and the northern Oscarsborg, the islands there. So this huge cruiser, 206 meters, Blücher, came in here. It was burning. It was listing to the port side, and it was a major fire in the middle of the ship that prevented them from go from the bow to the rear end. So and it was explosions all the time, and the propulsion was out. It was destroyed by torpedo hits, so it just drifted up here, and the current was going in the opposite direction, so the drifting almost stopped. The captain decided, Captain Voldog decided that he had to anchor here to get control of the ship. So before he dropped anchor, they fired the remaining torpedoes. There were 3 torpedoes that they could reach, where they had not been able to remove the pistols, the charging device. So they actually fired those 3 torpedoes against the mountainside here, about 200 meters south of us, before they anchored. And then they anchored here, just outside the southern Oscarsborg and the inside, and the vessel then turned around with the bow southwards and the rear end northwards. And with the fire in the middle of the ship, there was no option for the crew whether they had to go to Oscarsborg or to Hallangen. The ones on the rear part of the vessel had to go to Oscarsborg, and the others had to go to Hallangen when the ship sunk. Initially, Captain Voldog thought he was going to fight the fires, but that was impossible. There was no power, they had no pressure in the hoses, the pumps didn't work, so there came a bigger explosion, and finally the vessel listed more, and they realized that it was going to sink. They only had actually 1 boat they could use, because the other boats depended on cranes and power, which they didn't have. So they were able to launch 1 boat, and that was enough to get the injured soldiers and crew members in here. Because, as I told you, Blücher had more than 800 soldiers in addition to the crew members on board. So what happened was that finally they got almost 900 people, 975 actually, reached the shores here, different small shores on the Hallangen Peninsula, and about 500 and 600 out on the islands there. And they had to swim about 200 to 300 meters towards the current, while the ones that went into Hallangen had 300-400 meters with the current. It was mainly army personnel out there, and mainly the crew that was in here. There were some mix, but still that was the main picture. So the 3 flag officers came in here. That was General Sisman, head of the Air Force in the Oslo area, and it was also the Admiral heading the Combat Group 5, and it was General Engelbrecht, who was head of the division that partly was on board Blücher. And General Engelbrecht was quite eager to find out what happened to the rest of the group. So he decided to take that little boat after they got all the injured ashore here, and take it with some crew members down to Drøbak to find out if Drøbak was now occupied by the Germans. But they found out when it came about 3 or 4 kilometers, they found out that there were telephone lines ashore. So they went ashore, and actually he had an interpreter with him. He called to Drøbak and found out that Drøbak had not been occupied by the Germans. It was still under Norwegian control. So then Engelbrecht decided that he would take the injured down there where they had some huts and cottages where they could get give some better conditions for the injured soldiers and crew members. So that ended up being about 100 down there, 875 here, and 500 to 600 on the islands. And then some of the soldiers that were on the southern part of the island came in here. They managed to get in here with floating devices, anything that could float. And there also was a lack of life vest on board on the Blücher. So several of the crew members had given a life vest to the soldiers because the soldiers were almost very few of them were actually swimmers. And but it seems like that was kind of a bad idea, because the swimmers with life vest used more time to get in here, and got hypothermia on trying to reach here. So many of them actually died with life vests, while the other ones trying to struggle with improvised floating devices managed to get in, because they were working all the time and it went quicker. Now it seems like most of the southern part of Oscarsborg was emptied by people getting in here or being picked up by a Norwegian commandeered boat that was taken by an army officer who guarded some oil tank facilities further north here, and he was ordered by the Kommandanten on Oscarsborg to try to rescue the people that were on the island. So he saved some of them and got them into the small hamlet of Fagerstrand, and the others got in here. But on the northern island there was a captain called Guts, and he was against trying to get in here because he didn't want to be a prisoner, because by then at 11 there was a Norwegian Royal Guard company coming here taking prisoners or taking them as prisoners of war, and so he wanted to stay on that island, and also told all his 232 men there to stay there, and he also refused to go with the Norwegian lieutenant on that civilian boat they had out there. So he actually stayed there until the Germans came through the inlet and got in here and rescued him. He was never taken as a prisoner of war. And the rest of the Germans were then taken by this guard company and taken up to a nearby farm, Søndre Hallangen farm, and were imprisoned there. So altogether they took about 1,000 men up to that small farm, and we're going to see that later.
So we went from the shores of Hallangen, where the Blücher crew and the soldiers came ashore, and then went to the closest farm, which is Søndre Hallangen farm, and there we met with Sissel Skjellerud and interviewed her about what she had been told by her dad, Leif Gaarder, who was 15 in 1940 and was at that farm when the Germans came. And she told us that her father had, together with his other brothers, heard some explosions in the direction of the shore, and they went up the ridge where the communication mast is now, and up there they saw this cruiser that was actually sinking and burning, and as they stood there, it was a major explosion, and it made one of the brothers fall to the ground, and the others thought he was hit by a projectile or something, but it turned out it was only the air pressure that beat him to the ground. When they came back, it didn't last long before 2 or 3 soldiers or sailors came into the farm, and then there came several soldiers, several sailors, hardly dressed, wet, with no footwear in the snow. Some injured, some actually died there at the farm, and finally there was around 1,000 in this little farm, and the farm looked pretty much like it looks now, with the same house and the same barn, and that with 1,000 soldiers is something we learned from Sissel, but it's also according to the report that Fregattenkaptein Heyman, the first officer on Blücher, came with. He also said that almost 1,000 sailors and soldiers were assembled at that farm. And they had the officers in the ground floor, so they occupied the entire ground floor, and the family in the farm had to stay in the first floor. And in order to manage the farm, because they had animals, they had to feed them, they had to give them water, so they had to go down a ladder from the first floor and down to the ground. And especially Sissel's father, Leif, a 15-year-old, he had a lot to do with this job. But he was explained that he was bullied by some of the German soldiers, so they wouldn't go aside and giving space to get to the stable. So he decided to take the big black stallion that he had, because the Germans respected that and gave them space whenever he had that stallion with him. So he used that stallion wherever he went in the farm. we know that there were soldiers all over, in the barn, in the stable, and even some soldiers under the big ash tree where there was less snow than other places in the farm. And the soldiers were freezing. We have also a story written from single man Limbach, who was on board the Blücher, and he explained that he was in the barn and they were freezing during nighttime, and he went over to where the cows were, and find some place to sleep between the animals because it was warmer there. And he said that German soldiers and sailors were like herrings in a tin can in between the animals to try to gather some warmth. And they also tried to find something to eat. And some soldiers found potatoes at they cooked over fires in the farmyard. So it had to be a spectacular view to see that farm with 1,000 soldiers trying to survive. Around 11 o'clock, Norwegian soldiers appeared and pretty much then took the Germans captive. Until then, you could say that the Søndre Hallangen farm was probably the first piece of Norway that was actually occupied by the Germans on 9th of April. But then all of a sudden the Germans were prisoners of war, and the family thought that was a bit reassuring. But it didn't take long until 6:30 in the afternoon. Then the guard company left the farm because they had orders to participate in fighting further north in the Lillestrøm area. So they just left at 6:30, and then the family was captive again by the Germans. So they were quite. That was a situation they certainly didn't like. But then there are different stories on how the Germans managed to get away from the farm. One German captain said that General Engelbrecht, the head of the 163 division, convinced the Norwegian guard captain to send the buses they used up to Lillestrøm back to the farm so that they could take his wounded into Oslo, because they had the ship's doctors there. There was a civilian Norwegian doctor trying to tend to the injured, but they had no medical equipment, so of course they needed to get to hospitals, some of the injured there. And then the bus apparently came back and started to take the Germans into Oslo. And at that time, so that the buses could only operate nighttime because it was then the ground was hard, and the poor roads out there could not manage the heavy vehicles daytime, because then the sun would melt the roads, so it was impossible to drive through them. So it took a while until all the Germans got out of the farm and into Oslo. And Sissel also told us that after the Germans had been there, they couldn't even use the hay in the barn because the animals didn't want it. It smelled of oil and everything, so it was not able to use it as fodder for the animals. So they had to get help from the neighboring farm to get necessary fodder to get into the summer. So that's pretty much what she told us happened on the Hallangen farm on that day, the 9th of April 1940.